Hey everyone, Chris Scott here with Fit Recovery, and I'm joined today with Joe Barrier, who's a member of our online program. And I wanted to talk to Joe today because he has a really inspiring story. So, Joe, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So, let's get into, I want to start at the beginning because one of the things about alcohol addiction is that it seems to proceed imperceptibly for a lot of people.
Mhm.
I think that was a theme for me. I think it's a theme for you as well. Like you
Yeah.
get to a certain point and then you think, how the hell did I end up here? So for you, how did your drinking start? What was that like? And let's go maybe to the point at which it started to get a little bit out of control, but not
Yeah.
all.
So just quick lead up. Family history of alcoholism. It was always kind of a slippery slope on both sides of mom, dad. My dad's alcoholic, my mom is not, but grew up in families of heavy drinkers. Um, and so I stayed. It was the partying thing in high school. I did not partake until I got to college. Um, and then it was a couple of years into college, and then I really started going to parties during the week, the weekend parties, going to school in Wisconsin. That's the thing to do. Weekend parties, and then you roll Thursday through Saturday, sometimes Sunday, depending if the Packers playing, and then you're back on the train again next week, Wednesday, Thursday. Um, it really didn't transfer over to summertime. It's just seemed to be a social college thing for me. When college ended, I was in between, I was out of jobs. So um, a lot of downtime would be okay, well, let's go golf. Let's go do something social. And it was always alcohol related. You get hang out with some friends that, um, let's go to the bar for a soda is not a common thing. You go for a beer or a couple of drinks. Um, then that became, you know, um, drinking by myself. Um, you know, just became a cycle of every day, get home from work, have a couple beers, no big deal. And speed it up, really pick it up on the weekends, depending on what social aspect was going on or how I was doing emotionally.
One of the things that surprised me about your story was that you weren't drinking like 20 or 30 beers by yourself.
Yeah.
And I've had clients who do, and some of whom, they still are because they just started 3 weeks ago and they're probably listening to this. But for you, it was a much lower quantity than that, but spread
Mhm.
out over a period of time. What was the quantity like for you? And did it build up?
Yeah. So, um, quantity when it was really over a period of time. I would say it was probably 10, 12 years of just consistent drinking. I'd have one or two beers a night. Um, and then on the weekends, I would mix in some hard alcohol when the beer became too filling and I still was kind of chasing that feeling. Um, but it never turned into like, I have several friends that are in recovery and they were very perplexed on how I got into the situation I was in. They were a bottle a day kind of guy. And I always kind of judged my drinking based on others their quantity that they were drinking. And I was like, well, I'm not as bad as that guy, not as bad as she is. It was always a couple beers. Sometimes those 2, 3 beers turned into 6, 8, but it was never a whole case or anything that was falling down and stumbling drunk. It was always just a good buzz. Sometimes you get too lit up, but it was okay, well, it drank 10 beers. Now I'm going to chase 2 beers in the morning so I don't feel so bad the next day, but it's obviously on the weekend. I'm not doing that before I go to work. Um, so I don't know. Some would deem that like a functional alcoholic, I guess. Didn't have the shakes, didn't have the usual symptoms, but
So you never had like withdrawal symptoms?
no, I would have, I guess I would kind of chase that before they even set in. If I had a big night of drinking or a full day of drinking, the next day I would have, Bloody Mary or something just to kind of right the ship a little bit, if you will. But as far as the next day shakes or bad sweats or something occasionally, but it was never like a constant thing that you may see in other patients.
So, was there a time at which you started to feel psychological effects from this that really stood out to you? So you weren't having shakes necessarily. You were preempting some of the withdrawal symptoms, but do you recall a day where you woke up maybe and maybe you did have a Bloody Mary, but maybe before that Bloody Mary you thought to yourself like this needs to stop. Like this is out of control. I said I wasn't going to do that, but I did it and
Mhm.
and I feel not good about this. Was there a point?
Yeah, there were several points. Definitely many relationships were tested. Family and my wife, we were dating at the time of, okay, let's try to get this back under control here. Where you might have, you went off the deep end one night, next day, okay, you write a note on the beer of two or three only, or we're going to transition to red wine only because that's healthy for you. So you have one or two glasses. My wife had no problem stopping at one. If I was left to my own device, that bottle would be gone and I'd be getting another one. It was, I couldn't get enough. And definitely in the back of my head, knowing what alcoholism is and the symptoms and the signs, I had all the markers, but I wasn't willing to totally accept that. Um, I guess my recovery, how I kind of did it was in different waves and steps. But I wasn't really willing to call myself an alcoholic because that was the ultimate shot to myself of physically and mentally um, debilitating almost.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to this day, I don't love the term alcoholic. I was an alcoholic, and I
Mm-hmm.
use it to describe someone who's actively engaging in addiction. Right. At this point, like if someone doesn't drink, I don't see why they would want to do that unless they subscribe to a program in which that's part of the program. But certainly, you had a problem, and
Mm-hmm.
what I'd like to know, if you're comfortable discussing it, how were your relationships strained? Because I'll share real quick. I had a girlfriend in my 20s who kind of witnessed the last stages of my decline. And
Mm-hmm.
I felt bad for her because she did not understand at all what I was going through. She was, we were in our 20s and she thought like, what's wrong with you? Like I go out and have one drink, or maybe I go out and have six drinks because it's New Year's or whatever. And that's what she wanted to do, which is not advisable, but whatever. She didn't have a problem. But kind of party mentality, but then would go 2 or 3 months without having anything. And to me, it was totally that concept was foreign. And
Yeah.
I was sitting there waking up like trying to journal, but I couldn't because my hands were shaking. And the only thing I would manage to write is like try to only have three tonight or something like that. And I couldn't even in the worst phase of my morning commit to having zero that night. I already knew that I was going to drink, and I just
Mm-hmm.
had the illusion that I was going to have three. So when I told her about that, it strained our relationship because she started seeing me as weak, which to anyone who doesn't understand how the brain works and what's going on with addiction, that's what it looks like. It looks like you just can't keep your word. Like, what's wrong with you? And especially as a man, there's nothing more emasculating or demoralizing
Mm-hmm.
than appearing that way.
Yeah, I shake my head in agreement because multiple things that you said just were ring true to my personal experiences. Um, you know, I went through the same phases of I had a girlfriend in my 20s that I thought I was getting married. Love the girl, great girl. I wasn't able to um, put my drinking in front of our relationship. Like you mentioned, it became okay. It's a Tuesday night. Why do you want to go and get bombed? Okay, this is still in college, but we have finals the next day or whatever. Those priorities weren't there, and our relationship was there when I was sober. It was great. Once I started drinking, I knew that priorities were chasing how I felt, how alcohol made me feel like I was a better person. I was smarter. I had all the right things. You're trying to be that ultra, have the super awesome bravado. That's just not true. Um, I remember writing multiple love letters in drunken cursive of, hey, I apologize for my actions. The things I said and did were not true who I am. I'll make better changes. I'm in this for the long haul. Um, and even early on dating my wife, same story. Forgetfulness, my mental state, I knew it was there, just not as sharp as I was before. I would do the same things. It's the same habitual patterns that you feel like you can chase because you have that glimpse of clarity of your old self, of before you started drinking, your intelligence, your wit, all those things were there. But it's just, you think you are, at least I did. I thought I was a much better person with alcohol in me, and that was clearly the opposite. Um, there was several points in my dating of my wife that it was, is it me or the booze? And then it became, okay, no hard alcohol in the house. Okay, so we just switched the beer. Well, if you're making concessions for that, I'm going to exploit that without actually thinking about doing it. You're going to give that, I'll take a mile. Um, and then, in my situation, thankfully, thankful and not thankful, my situation, how it ended abruptly. Like, not my relationship with my wife, but how I had to come to reality.
Right. Okay. I mean, yeah, I relate to a lot of what you said there. So I'm curious as to in that transition between like now you understand you have a problem and then you get to a point at some point where your liver's failing. What
Mhm.
happened in between there, if you can describe that? What did you feel like? Did you have any epiphanies along there, or was it kind of I was watching an old video with of the actor Richard Burton the other day, who had a serious problem with alcohol. I think it ultimately killed him. And he said he was a very eloquent guy. And he said, some people, for them, their experience of addiction is that they just stare out of a window for 2 years. And that's sad. That hit me because I was like, I
Yeah.
don't really recall the ages of 26 to 28 that clearly. So what was it like for you?
Yeah, that's very true. You know, it, I've also heard it said like you're present, but you're not actually present in the moment.
Yes.
You know, you're not living for the next day. You're just there. Um, I was going through the routine, the same routine that you may see on, you know, day-to-day TV series or whatever. It's wake up, go to work, come home, do it again. There was no excitement. I've always been very interested in learning new topics and, pushing my mental um, strength there, and it just stopped. At that time I was working at a school. I was pursuing my dreams to be a teacher. Um, and I was working with some pretty rough students. I didn't know how to properly cope with that idea. So I decided to, I guess, would be now self medicate by using alcohol. I didn't want to bring that baggage home to my wife. I just kind of kept it with me. I'd still practice my 2 to 3 drinks a day. Um, Now the strength of those drinks would increase. I would go from a normal beer that would be 4.5%. I'd be drinking those 12 percenters. It would be a quick hitter, and then I was good, and the whole stress of the world came off. Um, Leading up to I was not mentally clear. I was physically weak. I had no appetite. Um, I'm a decent sized guy. I'm 6 foot 210. I like to lift weights, but at that time, I recall playing like a staff pickup basketball game. I couldn't even make the ball to from the 3 point line.
Mm.
Like I just couldn't reach it that far. And I was, what is going on with me? Or I'd be in class and I forget what I'm trying to teach a student that we discussed 5 minutes ago.
Mm.
Um, I'm typing, my hands are shaking. And, just the signs are just hitting you in the face and you're like, nah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. And maybe that's the athlete history that I have where, okay, you'd be fine. Just run some dirt on it. You'd be all right. Or I'll shovel the yard or shovel the driveway and be wiped out for 2 hours. When realistically, it's a normal task. Um, and at some point, um, I had lost my brother 6 months prior to this in a motorcycle accident, and I kind of went off on a little emotional bender there, both alcohol and just wanted to check out. Um, wasn't suicidal. I just didn't want to deal with the reality of that. I'm the oldest, and I always looked at myself as a father figure because I didn't really have one in my own. So I turned to alcohol for that kind of comfort. Um, and with that, I woke up in the middle of the night with terrible heart palpitations. Heart was just racing, 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 and almost, if it's a higher power or whatever. But I heard this saying of if you drink, you die. Um, and then I made a decision the very next day, talk to my wife and say, hey, I can't remember the last time I didn't have a drink, like what day or what year it was. I know in the past I went several months, I went several, weeks, whatever. But this was probably at least a 3 year stint before this came to a head. Um, and then the next day, went to the doctor, got some blood work done because I wanted to wean down and do it safely. And I'm very thankful that my wife pushed me to go to the doctor to get my blood levels checked because I was just going to do it with, Pedialyte, taper down, go from that 3 to 2, and then 2 to 1, and then eventually at 0 for as long as I felt like I might get a hold of it. Even at that time, I wasn't ready to give up drinking. I wasn't. It was still in my head a temporary fix because I didn't think I had an issue. And, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I didn't think I was broken. But emotionally, I was broken. Physically, I was very broken. And my mental state, I just didn't realize how weak I actually was in this whole process. Um, we, my liver numbers came back the next day. My doctor wanted me to go to outpatient. I told her, I said, that's cool. I don't have the money for that. So I'm going to do this at home. And my wife was at home. So at least I had someone there to look after me. My family also knew I was trying to do this. Um, and so 2 days later, go back and do some more liver or do some more blood tests. My bilirubin was 20 times normal. My liver enzyme tests, the AST and ALT, were all crazy out of whack. Um, but my doctor convinced me to go up to the hospital just to get some fluids because I looked dehydrated. So instead of raising a whole bunch of alarms, she at least moved me to the right facility where they can then expedite my care. I was transferred to a level 1 trauma center in Milwaukee, which they put me on the liver transplant floor. At that time, I was 33 years old, and this was in the peak of COVID. So I couldn't have my wife there with me during transport. I had to go via ambulance because of COVID restrictions. So it was myself at a hospital about an hour away from here. Super scary moment in my life because I didn't realize the gravity of the situation until the next morning. Um, the whole night, they were just running. I had the phlebotomist in my room every hour, just taking different blood samples. I remember reading the reports of, we're checking me for any street drugs, any other kind of things that might be wrong. I know that, let's check the usual ailments. We're going to check for AIDS, HIV, all the other hepatitis Z, A, B, whatever it might be, just to try to knock down why my symptoms are the way they are. Because overall, healthy, decent looking person. And the next morning, I was yellow as a highlighter. So clearly, my liver was not great. Jaundice was full set. I had distension within my abdominal region. So the usual alcoholic bloat that you might see some people have. They just don't have their liver still going strong for them. I was lucky enough to not really have those things. I just thought I was getting fat and comfortable, you know. Next day, transplant surgeon walks in my room, and thankfully my wife was there, and he said that he gave me 3 months to live. Um, I had just been married for uh, a little over a year at that time. Um, we were trying for kids, unsuccessful the whole time. Um, Mind you, I'm the oldest. My brother died 6 months prior to this. I couldn't think of how my mom was going to lose me and my brother all within a year. Um, and so we cried for a good long time. And next day, we asked the nurses, the physician assistants, everyone that came in the room for any kind of medical documentation, any kind of literature. Because if you're in the situation, you're getting your blood work done, they're going to use a lot of acronyms and different levels that you normally don't get from your normal doctor's visit. You're not familiar with the terms ALT or AST or your bilirubin, even unless you just had a child. You're not really paying attention to that. Um, and they use a MELD score, which is a combination of all these numbers in conjunction to give you a prognosis of how scarred or how bad your liver is. Um, and that whole process, thankfully, we're both very science minded people, and we were able to read through the scientific studies and the things of what's actually happening. Um, I think I was supposed to be in there for 2 weeks to monitor everything. Um, Prior to this, the main symptom in my detox was I was puking every morning for about a month and a half. And I thought, boy, I'm going to blame this on food. I'm done cooking, or my wife's on cooking. We're not going to the restaurant anymore, whatever. Or I'm super stressed. I'm nervous to go because I used to not realize I had anxiety and I'd puke before every football game just because I'd get so worked up. Thought it was that. I was just super excited to go to work. And then I would have nosebleeds for a solid month before this liver me going into the hospital. And they were not the little Timmy got a nosebleed. It's a 20-minute faucet out of my nose, and there's nowhere I could be instead of other than in front of a toilet, just because it's that. Um, Once again, I was fine. So those signs were there, and I just ignored them because we all think we're invincible, and that ended me up in the hospital. Um, I had to receive a unit of blood before they could discharge me. At that time, I couldn't even walk out of the hospital because I was so frail and weak. Um, they actually, when I was in the hospital, they had a bed alarm on my bed to make sure if I tried to get up, it would sound, or if I fell out of bed, which prior knowledge for me was only for those physically frail people that might fall and break a hip, or I didn't realize that was that bad. Even being surrounded on a floor of liver transplants. Uh, that's still that veil of I don't know what's actually happening. I'm still going to believe in my um, little reality that's not actual reality. Um, that's scary how strong and powerful the brain is when you want it to be. Um, Also, it's pretty amazing and how powerful it is on the other side. Um, you know, the strength to be who you are, um, to fix yourself is the greatest thing. Um, Sorry for rambling on that. It just kind of
No,
gets in a
that was not
roll,
a ramble. I did not want to stop you there because there's nothing I could have added to that that would have made that more powerful. And our goal here is to reach as many people as we can who may not realize that they're somewhere along a similar trajectory. And for you, your liver threw in the towel one day and you
Yeah,
didn't see it coming. And it also seems to me that, I'm sure nutrition played a role.
yeah,
When your drinking escalates, you get to a point where you can't retain the muscle mass or the strength that you had, and you're not eating the right foods. I didn't know until I was introduced to Dr. Rebecca Erickson, who helped me formulate BioRebalance. That she told me that people who have been heavy drinkers need like 2 to 3 times the amount of protein that other people need. because the liver needs that in order to regenerate itself, which it can do up to a point, but then it can get to a point where it's, that cirrhotic where it will not regenerate itself. So you were given 3 months to live. And then what happened? Well, first of all, you know,
Mhm.
what was that like for you? I know that you said you were thinking about your mom and you lost your brother, and I'm sure with your wife and you've been trying for a child.
Mhm.
How did you get out of that? You must have gotten out of the negative headspace somehow to cling to some hope. What was that like?
Yeah. My wife every day, because she couldn't stay overnight because of COVID restrictions. She would come every day, and before she came up to my room, she would stop at the chapel inside the hospital, and say a little prayer. Um, I, for the first time in a very long time, since I was a kid, started praying. Um, I thought that looking back at it now, it brought a sense of positivity. I know religion's not everybody's thing. I'm still struggling with it myself. But just trying to get yourself in a positive headspace. I started doing um, after, I'll back up here. So my wife would go to the chapel. I would pray every day. This was all after my doctor now, who I see. She's part of that team. She was not the transplant surgeon, thankfully. She looked at me and says, "You're young. Yes, you're not the healthiest right now, but in the past, you've been healthy. Um, you have every chance right now, if you don't drink, to see how far this takes you, because we know what happens when you do drink, and it's not prognosis is not looking good. So all you have to do is don't drink. Let's get healthy, and we'll work with you." Um, I was discharged. I made a promise to myself to try to act as normal as possible. Every day was a new day, whether I was in the hospital or I was at home. So in the hospital, I would get up out of my bed and make it every day. It's a simple task. I would open the blinds. Every day is a new day. I need to celebrate that I have another day. It's almost, that live like you're dying song, like it's silly. And when you're healthy and you're not really thinking about those things, but it's one of those things that kind of stuck with me. Puts things to perspective. Um, I was able to get my numbers down, my liver numbers to, I mean, they were crazy elevated at the time that I was released from the hospital, but they weren't deeming transplant at that point. Um, I then came home. They put me on prednisone for a month because that was part of their protocol. I would check in with my liver doctor twice a week for blood work. And then that prednisone lasted for a month. And then I came off of that. And you asked about withdrawal symptoms. That was the worst withdrawal symptoms I've had this entire time. I had the shakes. I had your typical withdrawal symptoms, fever, shakes, all the usual. That was the worst of all of this. That's not the same for everyone. Obviously, everyone metabolizes medications differently, and it just hit me really hard. I just thought I'd mention that because I haven't found that same issue for very many people. Um, it went from twice a week blood checks to then it got stretched to every other week, then to a month. About 6 months after I was discharged from the hospital, I mean, we celebrated my 3 month death anniversary, which is as morbid as it is, but that's, you got to have some positivity. Um, 6 months later, we did a needle core biopsy. So they actually took a super long, almost like a needle that they use for in your back to do a core biopsy of my liver. They found some abnormal cells that normally wouldn't be found in your liver. No real smoking gun of why this happened. My spleen was enlarged, probably, I wouldn't say twice, but it was definitely enlarged, which could have been causation between my liver shutting down. And a blessing, I'm glad it did. It changed me and my future. 6 months. So then I get to check in with my liver doctor every 6 months now. That is as far as they're going to let me go, which is great. Because I am now um, very intrigued of how my numbers are. you're going to get numbers that are up and you're going to have numbers that are down, like the way they're supposed to be. There's no real rhyme or reason what's going on. Nutrition, you talked about. We, in college, I was really big into lifting. I was protein this, eating the usual bodybuilder guy. It was chicken breast, broccoli, and rice. That's all I ate for the longest time. And so, being discharged from the hospital, I met with a nutritionist, and um, they give you recommendations based on the liver association, and then I found some on the heart association because I was on a being on prednisone. I had a sodium restriction of like 1,700 milligrams, which is near to nothing. Um, so you had to retrain your diet. And I went back to the old bodybuilding ways of, okay, let's eat as clean as possible, really pushing proteins inadvertently, not even, I research everything. My wife drives my wife nuts that I will research before I do anything. But, protein, everything. When I was sick, I couldn't eat. All I would eat was cereal. So I was losing my hair. My teeth were terrible because of my vomiting every morning and the malnutrition. So your body's going to start stealing nutrients where it needs it. And if your teeth are there, it'll start pulling it from there. Your bones, you start seeing people with bruising and things like that. And I had the bruises. I just thought I fell or hit something. Um, but just moving forward, it's just been heavy protein. It's been eating healthier. Yes, sure. Have the I love double cheeseburgers. It's like one of those things of, okay, here's your treat. You're doing well. Here's this as a reward. A slippery slope for a lot of people that drink or sweets. I know. Um, I love my Diet Coke. It's my way to keep on everything good. Um, candy is always a big vice, and it's things that you got to stay away from. But it's incredibly hard to do so. Um, but I don't know. It's I remind myself every day of where I was in the hospital and what I was thinking and how I was feeling. Um, just to be a little more grateful of where I am now. Um, I know they always talk, a lot of people have talked about, be grateful where you are and see where you can go. Um, it's easy to say, and that's that guy's thing. It's not my thing, whatever. It's, hippy dippy. But once you actually sit and get time to reflect on, you have 3 months to live, you start thinking differently. And it changes who you are as a person, it really does.
I mean, that probably gave you what people talk about psychic change
Yeah,
as something that people are sitting in rehabs trying to achieve that. I wish they also had nutrient repair and better nutrition advice and all that. But
agreed.
psychic
Yep,
change is important. But for you, that probably resolved the alcohol craving problem pretty well when it's simply like, nope, alcohol equals death.
yeah. That was the definitely the switch that was easy for me. I've talked to a couple of my friends that are recovering, and they're recovered. But they had to avoid, they had to completely abstain from any social gatherings that had alcohol or just hanging out at a friend's house that might have beer in the fridge because they were tempted. Um, Mine was pretty cut and dry. You drink, you die. Most people don't have that option, as terrible as an option that is. But if you frame it in that light, you could. It might be just that switch for someone might latch onto it and say, okay, I haven't thought about that one. If you're on a diet, you avoid things that are bad for you. If you can't drink, don't drink. This is how I'm very black and white structured that way. And sometimes I understand there's gray area, but if you're really willing to make a change, you need to really fully commit to it.
Yeah, I think your experience was, going to the hospital and being told you had 3 months was like a terrifying, the most
Mm-hmm.
terrifying blessing in disguise for
Yeah.
you at that time. And things make so much more sense when we look back at them. When I was sitting in a inpatient center in my 20s, I was thinking, how, like, I'll never make sense of this. This is the worst thing that's ever going to happen. This is the worst thing that has happened to me, and this is it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've just screwed up. But then a year later, I could make so much sense of what happened and why it happened when it did. So I think that's another message of hope for people. Now, the good news is that all of this happened 4 years ago for you, right?
Yeah.
You look
Yeah.
great. That
Thanks. I appreciate that. Um, yeah, and a lot of things have changed in 4 years. I mean, I now have a daughter. You know, the things that went away while I was drinking are now back, and they're better. My strength is better. I'm way stronger than I was even prior to drinking. Um, my brain is back to where I think it should be, and it's getting sharper. I used to think I have a terrible memory, but apparently that was just the booze.
a lot of things like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's I don't know. It took me a solid. It took me a while. I'd say probably about 2 months. They would talk about this pink cloud almost that you start to get a little glimpse of clarity with your brain kind of clearing up and your body kind of retaining or reversing back to like homeostasis, right? So you start thinking about things, you remember things, and then you infer off of those things. And then you start remembering things that led to those. It's a whole cycle of things. And it's a wild feeling. The world is alive finally. You're not just drowning out everything. It's not all just gray. Um, I didn't think I was depressed, but I definitely was depressed. I was definitely avoiding conflict. I was avoiding all the anxieties, realizing I had anxiety. Um, and that's how I was medicating for it. Taking those weaknesses and now turning them into strengths was a huge part of my recovery process. Um, I don't look at myself as an alcoholic. I look at myself that drank way too much. I had my fill for my life and I'm done. Um, we all make mistakes, and that was my biggest mistake, hopefully. You know, um, I'm just happy to be here and able to share my story with so many people, and hopefully I can make a change in someone's life. That's all I'm looking forward to do.
I think that's the most empowering way to look at it. And your story is super inspiring. Just one more question for you,
Yeah,
which is, at
sure.
what point did you find our Fit Recovery group?
So, in the process of me trying to taper down, I had found I found a couple of your YouTube videos, and I'm like, well, this guy's pretty jacked. Well, he must know what he's talking about, right? Um, I was always in the past I did look at AA. One of my cycles of up and down, right? Okay, I'm gonna stop drinking. Okay, I know AA works. Well, at that point in time, that whole struggle with religion really wasn't my giant. Like it just, I wasn't willing to go down that road. And Fit Recovery was not talking about that. I also incorporated things that I knew were foundational to life and health, which was, well, healthy eating, healthy living, working out, doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. Um, and not just completely centered. Well, obviously, alcohol is the center of it, but like not making that the main focus of everything. And I think that's the biggest thing of recovery and stopping drinking is it's just always constant point. I think that and that's what's like rang true to me while I was in the hospital. I was actually in the bed with the computer looking at Fit Recovery, and watching videos and inspirational videos and things like that, where it was just finding some kind of glimmer of this talks to me. I loved working out. Well, this guy is jacked. He used to drink. He's very successful. He's still being very successful, but like seeing where I could go. Um, and that's why it's almost surreal that we're having this conversation, because you see people and you're like, oh, that guy's cool. Well, I'll never talk to him, but neat. Um, but just that it wasn't it wasn't stigmatized, if that makes sense. I think everyone that drinks is worried about being stigmatized, so you go with the flow of things. And that's Fit Recovery wasn't inducing of that. It was very, you are who you are. This is what we're going to do. And this is how it worked for me. And let's see how it works for you. I think it was very beneficial that way.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's always great to hear what it is about fit recovery that resonates most with people. And I always wanted to have just an open-ended system. My motto
Mhm.
is like, if it works for you, then keep it. If I say something, even if it's something that uh, really I'm passionate about, if you don't like it, discard it. Everyone's different. The
Yeah.
last thing I wanted to do was to have some kind of like cult-like mentality about stuff. I guess maybe I'm thought of as the supplement guy. I am passionate about supplements. Uh,
Hey.
but at the same time, I think it's, you've, I think said you've worked with a hepatologist and you are taking some supplements and
Yeah.
getting your diet in order. Like human beings need to eat, they need nutrients. But even on that, there's a wide variation of exactly what people need. And I don't think there's like a one size fits all.
Right.
Uh, I think there's some things that, like magnesium, for example, I think everyone should look into magnesium and talk to their naturopath or whoever about it,
Yeah.
because it's depleted in the food supply. I won't go down a nutrient rabbit hole, but anyone listening to this who, if you have trouble sleeping or if you have anxiety or an alcohol use disorder, look into magnesium. It might help you, give you some biochemical reserve of willpower just by making you feel a little bit physically better. And that was my goal initially, was to, like, if the premise was, if people feel physically just 10% better because we're replenishing nutrients and fusing them with things that we evolved with for or hundreds of thousands, millions of years, uh,
Mhm.
before we were even Homo sapiens, then maybe they'll find it easier to get to that point of clarity where they can make a decision to change other things. And it's like, that's it, just a modest first step with the nutrition. And that kind of led to the biopsychosocial spiritual
Mhm.
model, which is also open-ended. And so I like to look at things through a missing links kind of approach, where it's like, my missing link might not be yours, right? Someone might have childhood trauma, someone else might not. Maybe they were just drinking because they already felt great, they had no depression, but they just wanted to feel 20% better every night after work. And then
Mhm.
5 years later, their liver's failing, right? That
Yeah.
can happen too. But then they go somewhere and they're told that they have childhood trauma and that they're an awful person and they're a
Correct.
cheater or a liar. So, at any rate, I'm really glad that Fit Recovery resonated with you and that it was part of your journey. And also that you had the support that you had, obviously wonderful wife. And thank you so much for sharing your story today, Joe.
Thank you. Real quick, I just want to tie into that whole nutrition thing and the supplementation. Um, Super big, especially for people. Um, for me personally, I would have terrible cramping of my muscles. My leg cramps were awful. I'd be on my feet multiple hours, 10, 12 hours a day. Okay. Thought it was my shoes, thought it was my work environment. It was really the lack of nutrients that I was taking in. And magnesium was a big supplement there. Um, you're in my situation, because I did have some sections of my liver that had cirrhosis. I started looking into acetyl L-carnitine or L-carnitine, depending on how people metabolize it. Um, Started supplementing with taurine, just to try to help shuttle some things around. I'm a big fan of, if you think it works for you, go for it, as long as it's safe and effective. It's that whole, do your research, look at other people's research. If science is not your thing, trust someone that you align with. If it works for you, great. You're not going to have a overnight success. You're just putting things back in that were supposed to be in your body that you depleted over years of abusing your body. So now try to get it back to where it was without going over the top. It's a simple things that we're just trying to be better every day. And that's what it really comes down to. Just try your best to be better. And that's where I think supplements allow you to do so.
Yeah, totally agree. I call it just intelligent experimentation. I was the guinea pig for like all the nutrients that I wrote about in my blog articles and YouTube videos and then in the course
Mm-hmm.
program. And luckily, I never came across something that did me any harm. And it turns out a lot of these things are really benign. Of course, that's not necessarily the case. There are medications that can interact with things, 5-HTP,
Mm-hmm.
antidepressants, et cetera. So everyone should be safe, talk to their doctor always. But it does
Yes.
seem to be an underutilized modality. And I always like to hear that it's part of someone's story. It's not, recovery cannot be reduced to just nutrition, but it does seem
Correct.
to be a big missing link for so many people. So with that said, is there anything else that you might want to add here? If there's someone listening out there who's right now, they're just in a state of panic. And I think it might be helpful just to briefly reiterate, the hope, the message of hope, that you have, because they might be thinking like, all right, I'm puking every morning,
Yeah.
I'm not sleeping, my teeth are not looking good,
Yeah.
uh, I'm bruising, but I don't know how to get to where I am to where Joe is now, and I don't want to have to go to the hospital and be told that I'm going to die.
Yeah. Um, Another thing to add to that list is are your friends slowly working their way out of your life? Mine did that. Hang out with certain friends. All of a sudden, they're busy every weekend. That was another sign I didn't pick up on. Now they're back, and I'm very happy that they are. The biggest thing I would say would be real with yourself. Um, Ask the support structure that you have around you, whether it be friends, family, whoever you have trust with, that they will trust you to the end of the world. You would trust them to the end of the world, whether it be family, best friend, whatever, spouse. Be honest with them. It's going to be rough. You got to be honest. Because if you are seriously concerned about who you are and who you might be becoming, that's you're showing the first step that you are willing to make that change. Um, I would talk to your physician. I would get blood panel tests done where it includes your liver enzymes. And that's where that will direct you to go. If you are one of the lucky people that everything seems to be checking out okay, now it becomes a behavioral issue, of why you're doing this and what you're trying to avoid or what you're trying to, I guess not the right word, but supplement of your life, of what you're trying to avoid by doing this actions. I haven't found anything positive from drinking. It was only negative for me. The person you think you are when you're drinking, you're not. No one's smarter, no one's better, no one's funnier. Um, I'm that stage of, well, I need to loosen up around people. Everyone feels that same way. And that's why a lot of people drink. But you can find different coping mechanisms to fit in and actually have a real conversation with someone. You don't need to be stuck at, a wedding for hours just because the open bar. It's go, enjoy yourself, have a good conversation, but you don't have to be there just for the booze. It's not something you look back at the next day of, oh, I'm glad I stayed there and closed the bar. No, no one ever says that. It's be the person you want to be and choose the path that's going to allow you to do that.